Welcome, everyone, to Talking Back to Suicide. This is your host, Dr. Diane Kaufman, though I prefer to be called Diana for my creative self. I'm a poet, artist, humanism in medicine awardee, and the founder director of the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention that uses the power of art to educate, connect, express, and heal. And our very special guest today on Talking Back to Suicide is Kevin Crispin. So, hello, Kevin, who
Hi, Diane. How are
knows,
you?
good, thank you. He knows firsthand the impacts that anxiety, depression, and obsessive compulsive disorder can have on our lives. Kevin also knows the healing powers of awareness, kindness, humor, and empathy. Integrating these polarities within his own life ignited a passion and dedication to becoming a mental health advocate. Kevin believes, and these are his words, stories are the great healing currency of humankind. The more we hear, the more we heal. He also says through though life challenges and difficult stories are universal, they are not universally told. Kevin wants to change that silence into voice and action. He's doing so through his skills as an actor, writer, public speaker, and podcaster. With a degree in theater from Southern Illinois University, Kevin has worked as a professional actor across the entire United States. Of special note, in 2017, Kevin wrote, produced, and performed a one-man show called Invisible Now. The show was about his lifelong struggles with anxiety. Apart from theater, in the corporate world, Kevin has traveled internationally with responsibilities such as customer support manager, chief of staff, and global project manager. After deciding to leave the corporate space in order to pursue performing and public speaking to benefit mental health well-being, Kevin became the host of the mental health podcast Sad Times, now known as Behind Beautiful Things. Kevin's goal is to help people feel less alone, both those who listen and those who tell their stories. He also uplifts workplace organizations with his keynote presentation, Healing the Wrist. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us today. I'm really delighted to get to know you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. So please dive in or put your foot in the water, whatever you feel most comfortable with, and let us know a bit about you and what you hope to contribute and accomplish through your journey of healing.
Absolutely. So when I was a little guy, I had these terrible, just really bad racing thoughts. And I just couldn't articulate what they were or what, and I felt just kind of misery. And I just worried about everything. And I would try to articulate it to people and say, hey, this is what's going on. But I couldn't say it right. And people were kind of confused. They wanted to help me, but they didn't understand. So I just kind of suffered in silence and worried about everything. And then at some point in my childhood, I learned that I was not the only one with a brain like this, that ruminated, that obsessed. And that was a seminal day in my life because it helped me feel less alone. As I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, as I'm sure you know, one of the things that mental health does most of all is isolate us. And so that was a really game-changing moment in my life because I knew I wasn't alone. And then from that point on, in a small way, and then it got bigger and bigger, I wanted to help other people feel less alone. So you mentioned my one-man show. The whole goal of the one-man show was I thought I had to make fun of myself. I'm a big believer in humor. And I'm a big believer in self-deprecating humor towards myself. And so I thought, what would be funny is if I did a show about all the really weird stuff I've been afraid of. And I've been afraid of some really weird stuff. Thought I was going to die in the electric chair. I mean, just really weird stuff. And the goal was to present to the audience like, hey, here's my weird stuff. I don't expect you to change any of it, solve any of it. I just want you to hear this story and hopefully hear something that helps you feel less alone, or helps you go and tell a story of your own that maybe you haven't shared with somebody you love in your life. And so my whole goal in all the work that I do is, again, to help people feel less alone. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners have had those moments or periods where they cannot quiet their mind, and they are overwhelmed with anxiety and emotion, and it is a very isolating, overwhelming, horrible feeling. And the goal of that show and the goal of the work that I do is to remind you, hey, you're not the only one going through that. A lot of us are. And I think if more of us spoke about that at our own comfort levels, I think we're going to continue to open up the dialogue around mental health, which I think is very important.
How young were you when, I guess, maybe even reflecting back, because when we're having the experience, we may not realize that it could be changed, that there's something
Right.
not okay happening. But in reflecting back on your childhood, how young were you when you first had a fearful thought? And do you have some examples of that?
Absolutely. I like to say I think I had my first panic attack when I was 5. Now, I didn't know what a panic attack was, obviously. And what was happening was I was staying at my grandparents', and, my grandma and I, we loved baseball. I still love baseball to this day very much, Chicago Cubs. Anyway, I was staying with my grandparents, and I was alone in their living room, and I was sitting in a chair, and I started to worry that I was going to run away. Now, I did not want to run away. I was afraid of running away, but I was so afraid that it was going to happen. And I started to get overwhelmed. Like, what if that happens? What if I run away? And I felt like, metaphorically, but also it just felt like the room was closing in on me. And it was so confusing to me because I was like, I don't want to run away. I don't want to run away at all. But I couldn't get the thought out of my head that, oh, what if I run away? What if I run away? So that's an early example of, when I had a panic attack. I have always that's a good first example, I think.
Did you tell your grandmother what you were thinking or feeling?
I think I tried to explain it, but couldn't. I'm even, as a 43-year-old man, I'm having trouble explaining it now, and it's one of the hardest things, at least in my experience, is when you try to come to people who love you and care about you, and you try to explain to them what's going on in your head, and they want to help, but they can't. And they look confused, and they start to feel, it seems to me, overwhelmed because they want to help. And then I started to overthink, why can't I be clear to my grandma? Why can't I be clear to whomever? And that just compounds the whole thing. So I think I did try to tell her that I wanted to run away, but I didn't want to run away, and she's like, well, you're not going to run away. I said, no, I know, but I'm afraid I'm going to,
Yes.
which is really hard to explain, especially for a 5-year-old.
This, in some respects, may seem like a giant leap. However, it reminds me of a fear a person could have, or an anxious thought, of I'm driving in the car and I'm afraid that I ran someone over in the car.
Like that you've already run someone over.
Yeah, but I have not. I have not hit a person or in any way, or I'm afraid I'm going to do it. Right. Another example is I met maybe she was about 16, 17-year-old girl with her parents when I was a practicing child psychiatrist. And she told me that she had thoughts about harming herself. Actually, it was stabbing herself. But she did not want to stab herself. She had been in the psychiatric emergency room with concerns about suicidal thinking because the stabbing idea was more than a self-harming cutting phenomenon. When I met her, repeatedly she told me that in no way did she want to die. In no way was she suicidal. She also had other obsessive and compulsive thoughts and behaviors. And my understanding of her was that the thought that she was having, I agreed with her that it wasn't a suicidal thought. Although if she acted on the thought, it would be dangerous, but that
Right.
it was part of an obsessive compulsive disorder. And for her, I prescribed medication, which was very effective, for her.
Yeah. Uh, and just even now, I'm 43, right?
Yeah,
Even now, just hearing you relay that to me helps me because, as we all reflect on our past and we think and we put ourselves back into where we were, there's still that feeling of loneliness. Even when I was telling you that story about sitting in my grandparents' living room, but hearing that about that other person and that you were able to help them and they were able to articulate, I'm afraid of this. I don't want to do this, but I'm afraid of it. And to hear you say that is like an obsessive compulsive thing. When I was 5, I had no idea what that meant.
yeah,
Uh,
of
and
course.
and so
It must have been actually a terrifying thought, right?
horrible,
Because, yeah,
horrible. And then I would be afraid that similar to what you were saying, I remember when I was maybe 8 or 9 ish, 10, I was playing basketball in my driveway with some friends. And then I all of a sudden had this fear that I was going to hurt somebody. And I did not want to hurt somebody. Like that's the furthest thing from my mind. And so I ended up, I'm roiling on the inside and everybody's just laughing. We're playing basketball, whatever. And I was like, I gotta go inside. And I went inside and tried to tell my mom, like, Mom, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt somebody. And really, what I wanted her to tell me is, no, you're not going to. It's okay. It's okay. But she didn't know how to respond to that because, again, she said, Do you want to hurt somebody? I said, No, that's the last thing I want. And so she was, again, confused and like, Well, I don't understand, Kevin. Which again makes you feel alone. They're trying to help, but it's hard for them to understand what you're going through because it's such a strange phenomenon.
and I think, and I'd like your view on this, but I think that potentially there can also be shame attached to having that thought. And I'm
Absolutely.
thinking of another teenage girl that I had met during my practice who described thoughts about wanting, quote, wanting to, the thought was wanting to, but she was not wanting to, hurt her mother. And she described in their home, there was some sort of a balcony in their home, and that her mom was standing on the balcony. And she, this young girl who really loved her mother, and they had a very positive relationship, had the thought that she wanted to push her mother over the balcony.
Yeah.
Again, it was part of a psychiatric illness,
Right.
yeah.
The intrusive thoughts.
Yes, the intrusive thought.
And again,
Hmm.
words you don't know when you're a kid. At least I didn't. Nobody explained that to me until much later what an intrusive thought was. And then they explained it to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah. I deal with those all day, every day. Okay. I got it. Got it. Got
And
it.
it's and intrusive in the sense of it's out of our conscious control,
They
to
just come
stop
out of
it.
nowhere. And you're like, please don't think that. And then, it goes to the old saw of don't think about a pink elephant. Then, of course, the
Exactly.
think of is a pink elephant, right?
Hmm. Did you have physical symptoms associated with having those intrusive thoughts or quote panicky feeling?
Yes. For a long time, or when I was young, I started getting this feeling in my stomach uh, that I now understand is associated with worry. Some people may say that's trauma in the body, any number of things. But I had this feeling every time I was sad or every time I was worried about something, I would feel it in my stomach. And I remember going to try to talk to my mom about it. I was like 6, 7 maybe. And she was like, "Oh, it'll go away when you're 23." And I'm like, "What?"
Oh no.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. I just got to make it, another whatever it was, 17, 16 years." Obviously, it did not go away when I was 23. Although I did joke the day I turned 23, I was like, "It's over. It's all over." Um, but even now to this day, when I'm upset, when I'm sad, when I'm struggling, I feel it in my stomach. And if I'm really upset about something, I have a hard time eating because I'll become sick. So it's always been in my stomach more than anywhere else, I think.
And did having those stomach aches or worry aches, did it cause you to miss school or to be late to school?
No, thankfully, it didn't. It was just kind of an extension of suffering and silence. I would feel that at school about certain things, and I just kind of felt it, and would maybe again try to talk to my mom, or really that's all I could really talk to about it, because again, it wasn't something I'm sure that you talk a lot about mental health stigma and things of that nature. And this wasn't that long ago, 30, 40 years ago. But it wasn't like anybody in second grade was just going to be like, "Hey, does your stomach also feel like it lights up like a light bright when you're worried about something?" Because you can't, you're trying to fit in with your friends. You're trying to become the person that you're starting to become the person that you want to be in some senses. And then to show, I think, what would maybe be considered a vulnerability to your peers is kind of a no-no at that time.
You know, you have the seed of a beautiful children's book.
Oh yeah, and tell me about, what do you mean?
Just when you just said about the stomach lighting up, right?
Hmm.
Just even those words that you used, do you remember them exactly? Lit up like a
Like a
something.
light bright.
Yes, I could see that as an illustration. Just talking about the way what worry can be in our body.
Oh,
That
I love
we can
that.
have we can have worry thoughts, and then you give a couple of examples of worry thoughts, and then you can talk about worry being in the body and use that simile or metaphor, right? That the child can identify with.
Yeah. Oh, I love.
Right, and that it's
You know,
important, that happens to lots of people, and
and what a
it's
great
good, it's a
thing.
good to share that with your family, your parents, your teacher.
Hmm. Absolutely. Because just to think, if I came across a book like that when I was 6, or however old, and I read that, or it was read to me, I'd be like, oh, that's what I'm doing. Just as now, like to my, now I read books every day, not a whole book in a day usually, but I read every day because it helps me understand myself. It helps me understand the world. That would just be an early example of that.
It would also make a lovely animation, right?
Yes.
Just a couple of minutes of a short film. If you
Yeah.
need an animator, I know a really good one.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So, have you, Kevin, ever had compulsive behaviors? So, the compulsive behavior could be thought of as an antidote per se of the
Hmm.
intrusive thought, but of course, it becomes a vicious cycle. That
There.
the
Yeah.
compulsive behavior does not eliminate the intrusive thought.
Absolutely. And I've had compulsive behaviors, still do to this day. I try to keep them small. I have to touch things certain ways, like with my left and right hand. I have a number. My number is 16. I Something that's come up about the last year or two that's really getting a little old is, like, I'll be at the gym and I'll see the numbers on the screen of whatever machine I'm using, say the elliptical or whatever, and I just stare at them and I add them up every second. I just add them up. And if it's 16, it's good. If it's 13, it's bad. And it's like, I can't stay and look at 13. Or if I'm in a car and I'm driving down the road and I see to my right address number and it adds up to 13. I have to look and try to find numbers. Maybe it's on the clock of the car to find something. It's like to say like, oh, I saw 13. That's bad. I compulsively do push-ups and crunches every day. Any number of things, and a lot of it is around numbers. And I think I take comfort in the fact that you can add up numbers and it's always going to be the same answer. Yeah.
At what point, or did you seek any therapy for this, or speak to a primary care provider? Did mental health treatment ever come into the picture?
Yeah, when I was 8, my parents said, you're going to go to this place and talk to somebody. Now, I guess I knew, yeah, I was different, but I was confused. I was like, well, why am I going to talk to this person? And I don't recall really getting a good explanation. Just, I grew up in a small town. So ride your bike down to this place and talk to this person. So I started going to therapy when I was 8. Now, I didn't know why I was there. And so I just made up stories. I said I was a black belt in karate, all this crazy stuff. So goodness knows what she was writing on her notepad. And then it was right after high school. I had done some therapy throughout high school, but it was right after high school I first was prescribed medication. I was prescribed Paxil, and I was on that for a number of years. And then I've been in pretty regular therapy for the last, we'll call it 15 years. One of these days it's going to take. So, and now I take Prozac, and that helps me. I've tried a bunch of medications. Zoloft did not work for me at all. It had the opposite effect. And I think a lot of people maybe who are, something I say on my show a lot, Behind Beautiful Things, is, people think, okay, I'm going to try medication. I think that people think, okay, the first pill I take will be the one that does it. And that's not always the case. It's kind of a try and see if it works. And I say the same thing about if you want to go to therapy, maybe you never have been. You might find that the first therapist you speak to, you don't have that connection with, you don't feel comfortable, you don't, whatever it may be. That doesn't mean you don't go to therapy anymore necessarily. It means you might have to find somebody else. So in this world where we want everything to be solved right away, unfortunately, with the most distressing things, i.e. mental health, sometimes we have to try and see and pick and choose between many options.
In terms of your life now, what would you describe as the current impact on your mental health? Is there, or does the OCD and the anxiety create obstacles in your life, or ways that your life is narrowed?
Yeah, there's obstacles every day. I think the way that I frame it now is something you said a moment ago about compulsions and intrusive or racing thoughts. I think a lot of people, I say there are 2 definitions for OCD. Okay, there's what I call pop culture OCD, which is somebody goes, let's just say I'm at work at a desk and I have files over here, and somebody walks up and takes a file and looks at it. And you say, I have those in a specific order. I'm OCD about my files. That's pop culture OCD. What I call actual OCD, people don't understand that the compulsion, the quote sexy part of OCD, is actually not the real problem. I mean, it's a problem. Certainly a problem for people where it's debilitating and they can't go through day-to-day life. I'm very lucky that I do not have that. But the real problem,
what I wanted to bring up also, sometimes with OCD, there can be a fear about contamination and germs.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I luckily don't have that too bad. I've gone through some real good bouts of hypochondria. Just real. I've thought I've had it all. I thought I had muscle death in my leg, for crying out loud. Um, and that becomes the intrusive thought. That becomes the ruminating. You can't stop thinking it. And so I think what a lot of people don't understand about OCD is the pain, at least for me, is the thinking and the emotions that go along with that, and the compulsions are supposed to alleviate that, and it does temporarily, but obviously it doesn't fully. And so I'd say nowadays where I have the hardest time, I think the way to say it is emotional regulation. If I'm worried about something, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm afraid, I have very strong emotions in my body. And for a long time, I didn't know where to put them. And I didn't know what they meant. And I remember calling my dad when I was in high school, maybe. And I just kept saying, I don't know. I keep having this feeling in my body, and I want it to stop. I don't know how to stop. And, he didn't know what to say to that, understandably. But that's what it is. It's the emotion. Thoughts connect to emotions. And then people with OCD, at least myself, we try to think our way out of those emotions. But the real kicker is emotions and thought are two different languages rather, and they don't speak to each other. So you could be feeling an emotion and try to think your way out of it, like I do pretty much every day, but it's never going to work. You can't think your way out of these emotions. You simply have to feel the emotions and sit with them. But as anybody who knows, who has these struggles, that's uncomfortable as hell. It's not fun. And it's learning to sit with those emotions. It's learning to understand that, hey, this is just a sensation in my body. That's all it is. And it will pass. As George Harrison of the Beatles said, all things must pass. And all things will pass.
Were there specific techniques that you learned in therapy or through reading books on how to tolerate the distress?
Sure. Some work I did in 2024 with some neurolinguistic programming. One of the things that I did is sit with feelings, and then when thoughts would come in my head, these intrusive thoughts, I learned to think of them as a cloud, and it's just something that you can observe. It's not truth. I think that's a really important thing to say to people is too often we think emotion is truth, but emotion is not truth. Emotion is a reaction, so allowing that emotion, to feel that emotion, or to have that thought, and to look at it as if it's a cloud. It's simple as close your eyes and think, I'm afraid I have muscle death. Okay, let's use that as an example. Closing your eyes and just looking at that, and it's floating around, muscle death, and then it takes it out of you, and it makes you realize there's nothing you can do about it other than allow the feeling. Because as I'm sure you well know, when we try to stop thoughts and say, no, I don't want to feel that, we're really just inviting them to stay. And again, we get back into that thought versus emotion problem, and then they don't communicate to each other. And then we just continue to re-up that emotion and re-up that emotion, and then it goes, and then you become completely overwhelmed when you're trying to do the exact opposite.
Did any of this lead into feelings of depression?
Sure. I've never, I don't believe I've ever been clinically depressed. I'm much more of an anxious guy, but yeah, it can get as simple as, well, why won't this stop? I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of my brain. Sometimes I say my brain is an omnivorous thing that is trying to consume me. And that gets me down. And sometimes as I'm feeling these emotions and I'm trying to allow them to be and not allow them to just burst out of me, which isn't to say that I'm pressing them down, but there are certain situations where you're feeling an emotion. You can't just start talking or talking to somebody about it because you're doing something else. So I just, it does get me down sometimes. It definitely gets me down because sometimes it feels hopeless. But then you have to remember, at least what I remember is, okay, I'm going to be worried about this right now. Another thing I learned in therapy that sounds simple but really works for me is, you know what? I'm not going to worry about this right now. I'm going to worry about it tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Yes. Hmm.
And the great thing is you kind of forget about it anyway, um, at least for a time. But yeah, it gets me down because it just is, it's exhausting. The brain worrying, the brain obsessing over things is very, very exhausting to the body. And you might just be sitting there, but you're running, your brain is going like crazy. And so you're getting more and more exhausted. And so
Is,
I get down. Yeah.
is there um, anxiety or OCD in the family or other psychiatric
Oh yeah.
diagnoses?
On my mom's side, I would say that my grandfather probably had OCD, never diagnosed.
Why do you think so? That he might have had OCD?
Oh my goodness. Very particular man, had to have things certain way. Not a cruel man, but just a very particular man who had to have it a certain way. And if it wasn't that way, it would upset him. Um, and I think he felt a lot of emotions, and the way that he dealt with them is like, for example, he built model airplanes, and he's in the Model Airplane Hall of Fame, I think. But that's a very exacting practice. He had a whole shop where he would do that, and I would be down there with him when I was a little guy, and very exacting, inch by inch by inch. And I think that that gave him a lot of comfort because it helped him feel like he was solving something that he was struggling with. And then, on my mom's side, there's depression and anxiety for sure.
Any experience within the family or yourself of having suicidal thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, that, what I like to say about this is I've never, it's never been about wanting to die. Um, I'm afraid of death. Uh, Although I understand it's the one thing we all have in common, and it's, part of life is accepting death. But when I've had those thoughts, or I've bemoaned, I just want, it's that I want the pain to stop. And it's not that I want to die, it's that I want something that will foolproof stop it. And so I'll say things like, I just can't take it anymore. I want to die, whatever it may be. But when I say that, or I've had those thoughts, I've come to understand that it's about the cessation of the pain, and not about stuffing myself out or committing suicide.
And when you felt that way, Kevin, what have you done to help yourself?
Um, I talk to people. I read, always read. I write. I work out. Um, I try to be creative in whatever way I can. Um, More and more lately, I'm trying to be more and more kind to myself about these things, and to say, hey, you're just having a rough time. And again, this will pass, and it's okay. You're not going to be 100% all the time. Another thing about my anxiety and OCD and stuff is I'm a very exacting person, and I expect way too much out of myself. The same thing that, I've had therapists say to me, well, Kevin, what if your friend came to you and told you exactly what you just told me? I'd say, oh man, yeah, you got to give yourself a little credit, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, what's the difference with you? I go, yeah, see, but you don't get it. That's me. I don't, which, obviously is logically faulty. And I've learned a lot in the last number of years how important it is to love yourself, or be kind to yourself, I should say. It's not easy to love yourself, at least for me, but to allow yourself grace. Something I say at the end of every episode of Behind Beautiful Things is, there's always room for kindness and grace. No matter the situation, there is always room for kindness and grace. And I think that really applies to ourselves. Um, uh, and what something I've heard multiple mental health people say, professionals, is, when you're on the airplane and they say, put the mask on yourself first before you can help somebody else. If you're not being kind to yourself and loving toward yourself, it's going to make doing that for other people that much more difficult.
Just last week, I had with my Hold On campaign, I had a display table at a community resiliency fair at a high school.
Mm-hmm.
And my table was opposite the adult protective services through the, I guess, Board of Health, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
county. And it had to do with elder abuse and housing needs or disability for the elderly, right? But it was adult protective services. And as I was looking at the table and their sign, right, I was thinking from a mental health and suicide prevention point of view, I was thinking sometimes we as adults need to be protected from ourselves, right?
Mm.
Which is like a different slant on it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of that in terms of the need for us to give ourselves grace, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A good example of this, like most people, I think, I lose my phone about, I don't know, 72 times a day. And I'm like, where the hell is my phone? And sometimes I say out loud, Kevin, you idiot. And then I'm like, wait a minute. No, no, no. And I say out loud now, no, you're not an idiot for losing your phone. It's okay. And I think that matters. It really does matter how we talk to ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm still
I
real bad about it, but yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, when you are in your actor persona,
Mm-hmm.
taking on the role of another character, do you have the intrusive thoughts?
Interesting question. Summer of 2024, I did some professional acting. I was in a couple musicals, and I realized that one of the few places in my life where I don't feel anxious is on stage. Which is, I'm sure a lot of people are like, what? Are you crazy? I don't ever go up in front of people, That's never bothered me. I've been performing since I was 4. And I had the realization that when I'm doing the show, when I'm on stage, I feel pretty at peace.
It's really fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe it's just I don't know why that is. And it's not like I'm a method actor and I, become the character. None of that. I just, I feel at peace. And for whatever reason, I don't feel anxious when I'm performing.
It reminds me, but I don't know if there's actually a connection. It reminds me of when someone has a stutter, and yet when speaking, and yet when they're singing, they are not stuttering. And I wonder if it has something to do with our brain and what neurohormones are being fired. It's just really interesting.
It is. I worked with a guy years ago who was the stage manager for a show, and I was on the run crew. And, stage manager says, stand by, light Q22, light Q22, go. Now, this gentleman in day-to-day life, when you talk to him just outside of the show, he stuttered. But when he called the show, he never stuttered.
Amazing. Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. What led you in 2017 to I don't know if you had originally written it in 2017, but to develop your one man show?
So in
What led to that?
2015, I went through a pretty bad, dark period. My anxiety became overwhelming. And as I was coming out of that period, I thought to myself, it'd be funny is if I did a show where I just talked about all the weird stuff I've been afraid of. Humor takes the power out of things. Humor is so important. It's, to me, the second most important thing after kindness. Kindness is paramount.
Mhm.
And so I had that idea. Then I fell in love. And so it kind of went by the wayside. And then that relationship ended, and I was terribly heartbroken. And one of the things I used to help myself was, I'm going to go back to this show. So in 2016, I finished the first draft. And then I started having readings of it, getting feedback, doing draft after draft. I did a GoFundMe campaign in order so I could pay the artists to help me. And I wrote it throughout 2016, and then early 2017, I performed it at a storytelling festival here in Chicago, and then I did a full-on production a couple months later with lights, sound, music set, all that good stuff. So what led me to do it is I thought it would be, the initial impetus was it'd be funny to make fun of myself for all these weird things I've been worried about, but also in trying to make light of it, also say, this is what's going on with me. I'm not saying that you in the audience have worried that you're going to die in the electric chair or anything crazy like that. But I know that people, to one degree or another, have had some thoughts or worries where they're like, what the hell? I must be some crazy person. But you're not. You're just a human being.
And I think we can be worried to tell someone that, because
Absolutely.
maybe their reaction is going to be either outspoken, aloud, or in their head, like, wow, that's weird, or you're crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the fear. It's like somebody will be like, well, that's crazy. And it's like, what? No. Years ago, I went to a therapist and then a psychiatrist. Same practice. Went to the psychiatrist for the meds, therapist for the talk therapy. And my first session with the psychiatrist was like, hey, all right, tell me what you worry about. And I thought to myself, well, I mean, if there's any place I'm going to tell, it's going to be here. So I just kind of went off and said, this, I worry about X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. And there was a pause. And he goes, oh, that's weird. And I'm like, oh, great,
Oh,
great.
oh God. I apologize for the field of psychiatry.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm just thinking,
That's
come on,
terrible.
man. So that was, with reactions like that, whether they be intentional or not, they I think lead people to just be like, you know what? I'm just not going to tell anybody about this, which only hurts you and hurts everyone around you.
Yeah, I don't think anything or anyone is crazy.
Right.
Right? And that kind of stigma, I hope it's 2026. We should be way past that. Unfortunately, we're not.
No, we're
Right?
not. But we
But
are further along.
so have you done more with your one-man show? I mean, it sounds fantastic.
So I record. My best friend's a filmmaker, and at the time he was living in New York, so I flew him out here, and he filmed 3 performances and cut together basically a video of the show. So I have that. I kind of took that show and turned it around to make my podcast, Behind Beautiful Things, which is just where I have a guest each week who comes on and tells stories from their life, often difficult stories. And the whole goal is not to any problems that may arise. It's not to judge, solve, or diagnose any of these problems. It's simply to allow the story to be told so that someone somewhere can say, oh, I thought I was the only one who felt that way. It's not about fixing anything. That's not our job. The show is about sharing stories so that other people can feel less alone. Very much like I tried to share my story in the one-man show.
Tell me, perhaps you might be interested. I thought of this as you were just speaking. I have a once a month Arts and Healing Resiliency Center online gathering. And
Okay.
sometimes it's on a workshop of writing poetry or story or painting with a bit of a mental health theme in the level of self-expression.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know, maybe you'd be interested in doing something around anxiety or sharing clips from your one-man show.
Oh, I would definitely be interested in talking about that and doing that because, again, the whole reason I did the show is to help other people. Um, and yeah, I think that would be something to be explored.
We can talk more about
Yeah.
it. Also, from your experience, if one were to want to become a mental health advocate, and of course, one does not necessarily have to do that, but if
Right.
one wanted to share one story, what makes for, at least in the quote, sharing performance of the story to engage the listener, right? Are there certain skills that a person needs or a strategy to organizing one's story so it's better heard?
I'm sure that there are people who would say that there is. I think of it as like DIY, do it yourself. We all have stories. I like to say that we are is a collection of stories, and no matter if we know it or not, we've told stories about ourselves our whole life. And so,
And people tell us stories about
right.
who we
And then
are.
I call it building the big empathy muscle. Hearing stories, sharing stories. We then understand our fellow humans more, which thus helps us understand ourselves more. So on my
That's a
show,
great phrase, building the empathy muscle.
oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
really good.
Thank you. On my show, what I do is I have a prep call with every guest. And in that call, I have them tell me the story. And some people will say, well, what story do you think your audience wants to hear? And I say, I'm not trying to be glib. They just want to hear a story. It's up to you. And so I have them tell me the story. And as you mentioned at the beginning, I used to be a project manager and I used to sit in these meetings and take notes. And I got really fast at transcribing what people said. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of be quiet and let them tell me the story. I'll interject maybe with some clarifying questions, but I'll build an outline. And then when we're off the call, I send them the outline for their approval. And that is so, as you can imagine, we just released today our 179th episode. And as you can imagine, some people have come on there and talked about some very difficult things. And I want people who come on to know what we are and what we are not going to talk about. And it is 1000% their choice what we do talk about. So I have that outline. They take a look rather. And they may say, you know what, take this line out, or, oh, I forgot to add this. And then when they say, you know what, the outline looks good, then I lock it into place and they know when we record, I'm not going to go anywhere outside what's in that outline. I'm not going to some question out of left field or anything like that, because these people are being brave, kind, vulnerable enough to share these things. And I want to make sure that they feel safe in sharing them. So I guess to answer your question, that's the way that I help people share their stories, is by creating a safe environment in which to do it. I don't really like the phrase safe space, but the problem is that it does apply. Creating
It's
that
like
safe,
having guardrails.
right. Exactly.
Going back to your experience of anxiety, I wanted to share that I've had experiences of severe anxiety.
Hmm.
I also I had attempted suicide when I was in medical school and ended up medically admitted. And then years later, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, which is depression and hypomania.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I've also had experiences of anxiety. I remember there was a period of time when all of a sudden, out of the blue, I was afraid to go to the supermarket. It had something to do, I don't know, with the space, the largeness of the space. I can't explain it, right? And I can remember one time um, making myself go to the supermarket, not to buy anything, but just to sort of stand in the space or walk around the space,
Like your
knowing,
own little exposure therapy.
yeah, knowing that I was free to leave, right? So
Right.
that was that. Fortunately, did not last long. That experience of not being able to go to the supermarket, and I must have found ways to purchase food, so it didn't impact me in a negative way. But it clearly was a problem for a little bit of time. Then there was another experience that I had, which was I became phobic about learning to drive the car,
Mm.
which I think began because in my family, my parents did not support their kids learning to drive the car because they associated that with drugs and sex. So,
Like the
uh,
car would bring you to drugs and sex?
yeah, like somehow if you were in the car, you could drive somewhere for drugs, or it was like independence. And independence, my parents, I think, felt. I grew up, I was born in 53. So I don't know, they were more worried about that.
Sure.
Not that I was going to do anything wrong, but none of us learned how to drive, the three of us. Um, and then it became a fear about driving, and it was only, and I adapted my life to it. Um, so I would walk to the train station and take the two buses to work. And my husband would, he would drive me places, and I limited, in a sense, where I wanted to go. Because if I wanted to go somewhere, right, and I didn't have a way to get there, that would create a problem. So rather than learning to drive, I started to narrow myself, right? But what turned it around for me, which I don't know if it's related to what you also shared about the project, the stage manager, right? Who
Mhm.
in that role could do it, or you in acting, weren't having intrusive thoughts. That when I had been married and ultimately I had become divorced, and my daughter was 6 years old, I knew I would have to drive her everywhere.
Right. She can't drive.
And suddenly, even though I was so anxious, I found the strength to be able to go through that experience.
It's like you just had to be um, pushed to accept the feeling, because you're like, I have no other choice. My daughter needs to go to school. My daughter needs to go wherever.
Exactly.
I
Hmm.
I have to accept it because my daughter's not just going to stay at home until she's 16.
And the last part I wanted to share with you was, then I want to ask if you've ever had these experiences. Um, I I developed a fear of escalators. And I mean, I had been able to go on escalators, right, all over the place, and sometimes really steep ones,
Hmm.
right? Um, but I don't know, within the last year, I started to be afraid of Ellis, I think it was a fear of falling. Uh, and I can remember even with my grandchildren at the mall saying, no, we'll take the elevator.
Hmm.
And that was because I was afraid. I didn't,
Yeah.
uh, but just yesterday at this conference at the hotel, there was a escalator, and going one flight down or up, and I was able to do it. I was proud of myself.
You should be proud.
Um, yeah, it was. I thought maybe it was that it was a narrower escalator, so it was more easy to put your hands on the rails than,
Okay.
you know what I mean, than
Yeah.
maybe because I would say 2 months before that, I remember I was somewhere else at a convention center, and I didn't need to use an escalator, but I saw the escalator, and I thought to myself, oh, I should practice.
Hmm.
I should go on that escalator and just see what happens. But I was too anxious to go on that escalator.
Now,
Just really fascinating, and I'm proud of myself. I feel maybe I've a little bit broken the anxiety around it.
I think it's important, exactly what you just said. You should be proud of yourself. And also, I hope, I think a lot of people, myself included, at a lot of times in my life would have looked, using your story, would have looked at an escalator and been like, I'm not ready for that. And then just beat myself up mercilessly about it. But that accomplishes nothing. It's okay. When I was a kid, another weird fear of mine, I thought I would, if my shoes weren't tied correctly, that I would get sucked into an escalator.
Oh my!
So that was
Wow.
a fear of mine as a kid.
Mhm.
Um, woo.
Yeah, a good reason not to go on the
Yes,
escalator.
yes. But of
Right?
course, my
Yeah.
parents were like, "Get on, come on." And what am I going to say? I'm afraid that I'm going to be sucked into the escalator. Like, so that's a good example of where I was like terrified of something, but also ashamed of what I was afraid of.
How do you think we can help a young child feel more comfortable letting their parent know they're having that uh, and scary thought?
Now, I don't have any kids of my own, but I think an important thing is to listen to what the scary thought is, and to validate it and say, I hear what you're saying. I understand why you're afraid of this. I get that. Let me say to you, here's why maybe you don't need to be afraid of it. But I think too often, whether people mean to or not, and generally I don't think they mean to be cruel, they just kind of scoff. They're like, that's a weird thing to be afraid of, or
Yeah.
why would you be afraid of that? That's obviously not going to happen. That is just going to push the child further within him or herself, and then they're going to be less inclined to share other fears with you. And then when you, at least in my experience, when I'm not able to share a fear, it grows inside of me, and then it comes out in unhealthy ways. So I think it's about listening and about taking it seriously and validating uh, what they're saying and feeling, and then allowing yourself to say, okay, I hear where you're coming from.
And
Here's
it's understandable why a person would be afraid if they're having that thought, right?
exactly, and
It's
say,
totally understandable. And I'm thinking too that sometimes we might react and say, don't be afraid. Whereas that we can't help but be afraid if we're having that thought. So it's the idea of venturing forth, even if we are feeling a bit afraid. Because the more we avoid, and I know this from my own experience, and I think you can validate this, the more we avoid the thing that we're afraid of, and again, we're talking about unrealistic fears, right? The more we avoid it, the stronger it gets.
yep.
We think we're doing ourselves a favor
No,
to
it
kind
just
of avoid,
builds and builds and
but it's
builds.
getting stronger and stronger and
And it
stronger.
becomes, as you avoid it, yeah, again, you think you're doing yourself a favor, but it's becoming more and more insurmountable in your mind. Uh, and that's no fun.
No. And we must have fun,
Well,
right?
I mean, we got to at least laugh. I come from a family of very dark humor, and that's how I've gotten through a lot of the painful things. Is you got to laugh at the darkest things.
So, how can our listeners learn more about you, Kevin? Your podcast, your show, your acting, right? Your mental health advocacy. And I wanted to also ask you, tell us about your healing the wrist keynote.
Sure. Healing the wrist is a keynote speech I wrote about mental health in the workplace, and the thesis and keynote of it is if I were to, we finish our discussion and I get up and I walk over there and I fall, I trip, break my wrist. Okay. There's something very clear. There are clear steps in order to remedy that. I call an ambulance or I get somebody to take me to the hospital. They x-ray my wrist. They see it's broken. They set it. They put it in a cast. 6 to 8 weeks later, however long it is, you go back, take the cast off, done, solved, right? Well, too often in the workplace and in life, we approach mental health as if it's a problem to be solved. And it's not a problem to be solved. It's a problem to be managed and understood.
And
so,
lived through. Yeah.
Right. And so in the keynote, I talk about how to create a space in your working environment and where people can feel safe to come to you about what they're feeling and to open up that avenue. So that's why it's called Healing the Wrist, which is basically like we need to come at mental health a different way. It's not about simple, I fell, I broke my wrist, now I fix it. The name of my show is Behind Beautiful Things. We're at wherever you get podcast. It's from a Bob Dylan lyric, like so many things in my life, which is, well, my sense of humanity has gone down the drain. Behind every beautiful thing, there's been some kind of pain. And it used to, as you said at the beginning, it used to be called Sad Times, but that no longer reflected the show. There's a lot of hope in the show, even though they're difficult stories. These people come on and they're just amazing people who share their stories. And it often is even when we hit the difficult parts, it ends in hope. There's a lot of levity where appropriate. We try to, we hope that there's times to laugh. So wherever you get podcasts, we come out every Tuesday. We have a website that for over a year I've owned BehindBeautifulThingsPodcast.com, but I haven't really done a lot of effort to redirect the SadTimesPodcast.com to BehindBeautifulThingsPodcast.com. That shit confuses me with all these. There's all sorts of weird stuff. So anyway, if you go to SadTimesPodcast.com, you'll see all of our episodes there. You can register to be a guest. And again, like I said, wherever you get your podcast, again, the whole goal of the show is to help people feel less alone. So if you're listening to an episode and you know someone in your life who could benefit from hearing it, please pass it along. Again, that's the whole goal. And then Kevin Crispin, CRISPIN.com. That's about my public speaking, about my acting, and some about my podcast there too. So you can learn more there.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And we're going to share on our Facebook page for the Hold On campaign information about you and the many resources that you offer. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
And thank you. I'm honored to have been here, Diana. And I just really enjoyed our conversation. And thank you so much for giving me the space and having me on.
Thank you.